Claire knew something was off the second her work email pinged at 4:53 p.m. on a Friday, the corporate equivalent of slipping a breakup note under the door and sprinting. Subject line, Organizational Restructuring Update. That's HR speak for "we're screwing you over with a smile." She clicked it. Read it once. Blinked. Read it again, slower. Effective immediately, your position is no longer necessary. Health benefits will be terminated as of today's date. No thank you for your service. No best of luck in your future endeavors. Not even a pity emoji. Just a digital guillotine. And to make sure the blade cut clean, they didn't even offer Cobra coverage. Claire sat perfectly still in her ergonomic chair, the one she had to fight procurement to order 2 years ago because of her degenerative joint pain. Same chair she thought she'd be wheeled out of at retirement. Her throat tightened, but no tears came. This wasn't sadness. This was static. A buzzing white-hot static crawling across her skin like a fever breaking. Then she did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She opened the locked drawer beneath her desk. Inside was a manila folder labeled, in her neat cursive, company weirdness. Vendor invoices that made no sense. Screenshots of contractor names that magically matched the linked in profiles of full-time employees. Internal emails flagged with yellow highlighter and question marks. Her insurance denial letter from last year that had internal error written in the margins. Claire had been quietly collecting receipts like a squirrel stockpiling acorns, not for revenge, but for survival. And here we are. If you've ever been blindsided by a bland email that kicks you to the curb, while a CEO is out popping champagne over record profits, you're not alone. Before we go any further, 97% of folks listen to these stories without hitting that subscribe button. Wild, right? If you're feeling seen, or even just entertained, go ahead and tap subscribe and give us a like. It tells the algorithm gods we should keep lighting these corporate dumpster fires. Trust me, it really keeps our crew fueled to keep digging up the dirt. Back to Claire. She exhaled through her nose, the way a woman does when she's about to flip the script. No calls to HR, no begging for severance. She didn't even bother to forward her emails to her personal account because she already had backups. She had known for a while that something stank beneath the glossy facade of fallen logistics, not just bad breakroom coffee or the mold behind the printer, which she reported 5 times for the record. This was deeper. She'd watched over the years as full-time roles morphed into contractor partnerships, as entire teams were dissolved and reassembled offshore with no notice. She'd heard whispers about vendor shell companies billing for consulting services nobody ever received, but she hadn't acted. Not yet. Because life had been hard enough already, single mom, autoimmune condition, medical debt that stacked like cursed Jenga blocks. Now, with no job and no insurance just weeks before her scheduled surgery, the company had taken the one thing she'd held onto through it all, a sense of basic security. And that's when it clicked. They didn't fire her to save money. They fired her to make sure she wouldn't be expensive. Claire stood up, her joints aching as always, but her spine straighter than it had been in years. She took the folder, slipped it into her tote bag, and walked out of the office like it was the last day of a prison sentence. Let Greg Fallon toast to lean operations. Let HR giggle over happy hour martinis about how the dead weight's gone. She had the weight they should have feared, receipts. And receipts, unlike executives, don't lie. Monday morning arrived like a sick joke, and Claire wasn't about to waste it sipping herbal tea and crying into a Sudoku book. She pulled up her laptop, logged into her personal Zoom account, and keyed in the digits from an old recurring meeting link she'd kept just in case. It was the Fallon Logistics bi-weekly all-hands, the same meeting where Greg Fallon once shared a PowerPoint about radical transparency right before firing 2 departments over Slack. And sure enough, the camera lit up. Greg's smirking mug filled the screen, framed by the tasteful grage walls of his executive home office. Man looked like someone who'd never sneezed without a personal assistant holding a monogrammed tissue. "Good morning, team," he said, voice syrupy with manufactured empathy. Tough decisions had to be made last week, but they were necessary. We're leaner now, more agile. He leaned in slightly, eyes twinkling like a predator in a Patagonia vest. We had to trim the fat, some of it still whining on LinkedIn, I hear. Chat window burst with little laughing emojis and lols from the same middle managers who'd spent Friday privately texting Claire variations of "I'm so sorry" and "let's get drinks soon." Claire sat there, fists clenched around her coffee mug so tight the ceramic creaked. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Instead, she opened a new tab, logged into LinkedIn, and typed a single sentence. Sometimes cuts expose rot. No hashtags, no emojis, no context. Just an open nerve, broadcast quietly. 10 minutes later, the first DM slid in. From Marion, a former coworker who left last year after being transitioned to freelance without ever choosing to be. You didn't hear this from me, but the contractor list is a fraud. Ask yourself why half of them have fallen logistics emails. Claire stared at the message. Her mouth opened a little, then closed again. She opened the Excel file she'd kept in that same locked drawer, and she'd always thought was just a paranoid hobby. Contractor records MISC. 2020-2022. She scanned for the names Marion mentioned. There they were, contractors listed as external vendors, but showing up in old IT onboarding emails. One even had a company laptop issued. That wasn't freelancing. That was payroll laundering. She started pulling threads, digging through archived onboarding docs, scanned NDA forms, vendor approval flows. She noticed something odd. Several consultants were marked as paid through a third-party LLC that traced back, through a P.O. box in Cincinnati, to the wife of Fallen's golf buddy. The same P.O. box had been used for 4 separate vendors in the past 5 years. All temporary consulting services, all blessed by legal with 0 contracts uploaded to the portal. Suddenly, this wasn't about her anymore. This was systemic, and worse, deliberate. Her phone buzzed again. Another former colleague, then another. Hey, I always wondered if you noticed how no one ever clocked hours for remote contractors. Remember that intern who mysteriously became a vendor for 6 months? I think they falsified our department's headcount during open enrollment. Claire's mind raced, not with panic this time, but with math, penalties, statutory fines, IRS whistleblower payout percentages. Greg could toast his agility all he wanted. But a company built on fraud doesn't pivot, it collapses. And she wasn't just watching the house of cards wobble anymore. She was blowing. The air inside the storage unit smelled like dust and betrayal. Claire hadn't stepped foot in it since last spring, when she'd stuffed away her old tax records, some family photo albums, and a banker's box labeled Work Junk Keep. That box was now center stage. She dragged it out, her knees cracking with every bend, sat cross-legged on the concrete floor like a woman about to crack open Pandora's damn filing cabinet. At the very bottom, nestled under a cracked snow globe and her old employee ID, were the 2 flash drives she'd labeled RED and black and nail polish. A decade of meticulous paranoia disguised as routine backups. Red was full of archived emails and exported Slack logs. Black, spreadsheets, contracts, internal policy drafts. One folder she titled Stuff That Feels Illegal, probably is. She popped open her laptop right there on the cement, piggybacking off the building's free Wi-Fi. The first thing she opened was a folder called Vendor Logs 2017. That's when the memories started punching back. The $87,000 consulting invoice from Miller and Associates for a Q2 efficiency review that never happened. Same Miller and Associates whose address led to a mailbox inside a UPS store next to a vape shop in Dayton. Or the project scope document that included 5 full-time contributors, only 3 of whom were listed in HR's files. The other 2, they were on the contractor list, paid under 1,099s, no benefits, no protections. Claire remembered how one of them, Carla, had a miscarriage at her desk, and HR refused to approve FMLA because she's technically not one of ours. Claire had brought that up to her manager back then. He'd shrugged and said, "That's above our pay grade." Contractors are complicated. She pulled up Carla's onboarding email. It had a Fallen logistics domain. IT had provisioned her a phone line and badge access. She was technically everything but protected. Claire opened a fresh spreadsheet, labeled it Misclassified Personnel. Row by row, she started compiling names. Email timestamps, access logs, payment methods, insurance status. By hour 3, she had over 40 entries, 40 people denied benefits, 40 lives restructured to help Greg Fallen afford another bourbon-fueled retreat with the board. She scrolled through an internal budget proposal she'd saved from last fall. Line item jumped out. Cost reduction through talent pipeline optimization projected Q4 savings. $1.4 M. She clicked into the footnote and found the phrase, strategic offboarding of high-expense FTEs into contractual partnerships. Offboarding, like they were luggage. Claire pulled out her phone, tapped the voice memo app, and hit record. Her voice came out low and even. They weren't trimming fat. They were laundering fraud. She paused, added, and they thought no one would notice. There it was, no longer a theory or gut feeling. She had evidence. She had patterns. She had motive and method. She had leverage. Claire sat back, staring at the growing web of deceit sprawled across her screen. She wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't the sick woman worrying how she'd pay for an MRI or a month's supply of immunosuppressants. She was the witness. She was about to testify in the only language corporations understand: paper trails with decimal points. The law office didn't look like anything from TV. No mahogany bookshelves. No assistants clacking heels down marble halls. Just a converted floor in a downtown Cleveland brick building, above a vape shop and a bail bonds place that advertised 24-hour service. Claire stood at the elevator for a full minute before she pressed the buzzer, not because she was unsure, but because the anxiety had started to hum in her bones like distant thunder. This was it. The part where a pissed-off admin assistant turned into something dangerous. Inside, everything smelled like burnt coffee and toner ink. The receptionist handed her a clipboard with forms, then pointed her toward conference room B. The attorney met her there, gray suit, no tie, wireframe glasses, the tired eyes of a man who'd seen more fraud than faith in his lifetime. Claire Monroe? She nodded, shook his hand, sat down. He wasted no time. You said in your email you have documentation. Misclassification, false vendors, fraudulent use of health exemptions. Claire opened her laptop, slid the flash drive across the table. It's all here. Vendor invoices, staff rosters, payment logs. I've highlighted names and attached screenshots for each item. Raised an eyebrow. You indexed it? I worked in logistics. We track things. He smiled just barely and plugged the drive in. For the next 20 minutes, the room filled with nothing but mouse clicks and the occasional sharp breath through his nose. She watched him scroll. His expression hardened the deeper he went. When he finally leaned back, it wasn't with relief, it was with dread. This isn't just cut corners. This is structured fraud. If even half of this holds up, it's a violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act, multiple tax codes, ERISA, and probably a few things I'll have to look up. Claire kept her eyes steady on him. Can I file anonymously? He hesitated to a degree. The IRS and Department of Labor keep whistleblower identities confidential, but if this goes public, especially if criminal charges follow, you'll be linked, and they will retaliate, not officially, but quietly. They always do. Claire nodded slowly. About compensation, he leaned forward. If the government collects fines or recovers funds because of what you provide, you're entitled to a percentage. It can range from 15 to 30%, depending on your role and the impact. She didn't blink. What do we do first? He opened a legal pad. We file Form 211 with the IRS and submit an attorney-certified evidence package. Then we do the same with the Department of Labor's whistleblower division. After that, his voice trailed off. Then he looked at her. Once we file, you can't go back, and they will retaliate. Are you sure? Claire looked out the window. Downtown Cleveland was gray and wet. People huddled under umbrellas, moving like ants in the rain. They already took my job, my insurance, my dignity. They left me one thing. What's that? He asked. She turned to him with a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. Time and the truth. I'm not scared of using either. And argue, just picked up his pen. Okay then, Claire, let's burn it down the right way. And just like that, she stepped over the line. From discarded admin to federal informant. No more hoping someone else would notice. No more waiting for karma. Now she was karma. It started with a text at 7:12 a.m. on a Thursday. Marion, 2 guys from the Department of Labor just walked into reception. No appointment, suits, badges. People are freaking out. Claire read it 3 times, then tucked her phone back into her robe pocket like it was a live grenade. She didn't need caffeine that morning. She was running on adrenaline and cold vengeance. By 9:00 a.m., she'd heard from 2 more former coworkers. Greg Follin's calendar had been cleared. His executive assistant had a meltdown in the hallway and was overheard muttering something about backdating authorization memos. One of the VPs, Daniel, one who always called Claire Kiddo in meetings like he was doing her a favor, had locked himself in his office and left by lunch with a cardboard box and a company-issued iPad that he knew damn well was being tracked. Claire didn't gloat. Not publicly. Not yet, but she did open LinkedIn. She typed slowly, deliberately. Silence is cheaper until it's not. She hit post, stood up, and watched the likes pour in. Former colleagues, mid-level managers from companies she'd never worked at. Even an HR consultant she'd once clashed with during open enrollment season, commented, "This hits hard. I hope whoever needs to see it does." They would. By noon, her inbox was full. One anonymous message from a current employee said internal communications were being wiped in real time. Another said their team lead had accidentally deleted 3 months of timesheet approvals from the shared drive. Greg had canceled his ski trip to Aspen. That was the cherry on top. He was scheduled to leave that Friday. But as one message read, Insider, Fallen looked like he aged 10 years in one morning. No blazer, no jokes, just sweat and silence. Claire kept her phone face down on the table, watching the shadows shift through her blinds. The weight in her chest wasn't fear anymore. It was the sensation of waiting for a storm to finish swallowing a town. She made tea, sat with a notebook, began sketching out a timeline. What they'd done, who signed what, when patterns started. Across town, a fire was crackling through cold corridors filled with framed motivational quotes and glossy diversity initiatives posters, and no one could stop it. By dinner, her LinkedIn post had over 8,000 likes. A nonprofit for workers' rights had reposted it with a caption, "More people need to speak up." Claire Monroe, we stand with you. Claire didn't stand. Not yet, she watched, waited. The frost was setting in at HQ, but she wasn't done watching it crack. The ground wasn't just frozen, it was about to fracture. And she knew exactly where the pressure points lived. The DM came on a Saturday, right between Claire chopping carrots and watching her cat chase imaginary ghosts across the linoleum. Jessica R., Northeast Ohio Newswire. Hi, Claire. I'm writing a piece on fallen logistics. Off the record, we've been getting documents. Vendor trails, benefit classifications, flagged audits. Any interest in commenting? Even just a sentence. Claire stared at the message like it had teeth. She hadn't shared a damn thing with the press yet, which meant someone else, maybe even someone still inside, was throwing kindling on the same fire she'd sparked. She dried her hands, sat down at the kitchen table, and typed her reply. Exploitation looks profitable till someone turns on the lights. Nothing more, nothing less. Jessica replied with a simple, "Thank you. This is about to get loud." It did. The article dropped Sunday evening. Banner headline, Internal fraud and misclassification allegations, rock fallen logistics. Claire's quote sat halfway down, just below a subheading about systemic abuse of contractor classifications, and above a graphic showing the payout structure of federal whistleblower rewards. They didn't name her directly. The tone was unmistakable. By morning, #fallen fraud was trending in the Midwest. The company's official statement was limp and lawyer-soaked. We take all compliance concerns seriously and are cooperating fully with investigators. Which sounded a lot like, please don't look under the rug, it's soaked in gasoline. Claire's phone started humming like a beehive on fire. "Thank you. I never thought someone would stand up. You're braver than you know. I still work there. I'm scared, but I've got stuff. Call me." The messages poured in from data analysts, facilities coordinators, even a woman in accounting who claimed she was pressured to approve backdated time cards with pre-filled hours. Someone leaked a screenshot from the internal Slack. Greg Fallen, no one talks to the press. Legal is handling it. 2 hours later, the Fallen Logistics website mysteriously went offline. Under maintenance, it read, stock photo of a smiling woman holding a wrench. Claire almost laughed. But then came the moment she didn't know she'd been waiting for. The local news at 6 o'clock. There he was, Greg Fallen, on the screen, striding briskly through a parking garage in a windbreaker that probably cost more than Claire's car. Reporters flanking him. Microphones in his face. "Mr. Fallen, are you under federal investigation? Did your company misclassify employees to avoid benefits, or do you have a comment on the class action rumors?" Greg didn't say a word, just kept walking, face pale, jaw clenched so tight it looked like he was trying to chew through regret. Claire stood in front of her TV, arms crossed, tea cooling in her hand. This wasn't revenge porn. It wasn't even vindication. It was something quieter, stranger. The kind of justice that doesn't arrive with trumpets, but with paperwork and panic. Her suite didn't even begin to cover it. Because while Greg Fallen's empire trembled on air, Claire still had her medical bills. Still woke up with aching joints and wondered how long it would take the IRS to finish their process. But she also had a voice now, one that echoed, and the lights, they were only just beginning to flicker on. The email hit her inbox at 3:17 p.m. on a Wednesday, titled Reconciliation and Resolution Proposal Urgent Response, requested. Claire didn't open it right away. She stared at the subject line for a full minute, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching a squirrel outside her window try and fail to carry off a Pop-Tart wrapper. Then she clicked. It was from a new law firm, one that hadn't been on any previous Fallen correspondence. A polished signature, sterile font, and the kind of legalese that thinks it's wearing cologne. Miss Monroe, we represent Fallen Logistics. In light of recent developments, our client wishes to propose a mutually beneficial reconciliation, including financial restitution and confidentiality assurances to avoid further reputational harm to all parties. There was an attached NDA, 12 pages of gag orders, clauses, and golden handcuffs. They offered her a settlement. 6 figures. Retroactive health coverage, generous goodwill bonus to close the matter with dignity. Dignity that was rich. Claire didn't scream. She didn't throw her mug or rage text her attorney. Instead, she opened her files, pulled up the receipt from her IRS whistleblower submission, screenshotted it, and attached it to her reply. One word in the body of the email, no. She hit send, stood up, and cracked her neck. It felt final. Not like an ending, but like the sound a door makes when you throw the bolt. An hour later, her attorney called. No pleasantries. Claire, we just got the confirmation. The IRS has filed formal criminal charges against Greg Fallen and one other exec, Jasper Browning, the CFO. Claire closed her eyes, let it settle in like warm water in her bloodstream. Fraud, conspiracy, willful misclassification, wire fraud, and a sweet little cherry, obstruction of a federal audit. Fallen Logistics had officially become a criminal enterprise in the eyes of the government. And she'd lit the match. She thought back to the last time she saw Greg in person, smug, tie half loosened, making a joke during Q, and about how HR keeps things spicy with their annual compliance scramble. The same man who'd once laughed when she asked why a diabetic coworker couldn't get insurance approval for insulin coverage. Now he was lawyered up, bleeding money by the hour, staring down felony charges. Claire didn't feel rage anymore. No righteous fury, no vindictive thrill, just satisfaction. The kind that settles low in your chest and hums when you exhale. They thought she'd fold. They thought everyone would. That NDAs and severance crumbs could mop up the blood they spilled behind boardroom doors. But you can't buy silence when the truth's already been filed with the feds. You sure as hell can't rewrite history when your name's printed on the indictment. It came in a nondescript white envelope, the kind you'd expect to hold junk coupons or a jury duty summons, not life-altering deliverance. Claire almost missed it in the mail stacked between a Bed Bath & Beyond flyer and a reminder from her pharmacy she couldn't afford anymore. But then she saw the return address, Department of the Treasury. Her fingers stopped shaking just long enough to open it. Inside, a check, a real one, government-sealed, black ink, crisp edges. Claire stared at the number so long she forgot to breathe. It was surreal, like staring into the eyes of a bear that suddenly sits down and offers you tea. It was more than 5 years of her old salary, before taxes, before co-pays, before her life got diced into spreadsheets and apologies. She stood in her tiny kitchen, afternoon sun casting gold stripes across the tile, and let herself feel it, not joy, not even victory, but something deeper, something like release. She didn't call anyone, didn't post a video, didn't scream into the sky like some TikTok rags-to-riches influencer. Instead, she opened her laptop, found the listing she'd saved 2 months ago. Secluded cabin, Appalachian foothills, private acreage, wood stove, no cell signal, and clicked contact seller. Friday, the deposit was wired. By Sunday, the keys were en route in a UPS envelope with a handwritten note from the owner. I hope it brings you peace. It did for me. Claire stood on the edge of her new land a week later. Crisp pine air, silence that didn't need buffering. No one telling her to circle back or streamline deliverables. Just a battered porch swing and a pile of firewood stacked like cathedral bricks. That afternoon, she posted one final update to LinkedIn. I don't need a corner office when I've got sunrise over pines. She shut her laptop, logged out, permanently. That same day, the local news showed a clip that would loop for weeks in Claire's mind. Greg Fallen, looking thinner and angrier, being escorted into a federal building by 2 plainclothes agents. No cuffs, not yet, but the look in his eyes said everything. Gone was the swagger, the smug grins, whiskey laugh that used to echo through quarterly meetings. Now, he looked like a man staring down the barrel of the exact system he'd weaponized for years. Claire didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. This wasn't revenge, this was a reset. And as the screen faded to a commercial for life insurance, Claire turned off the TV, opened the cabin door, and breathed. Really breathed. For the first time in a long, long time. The courthouse steps were slick with early frost. The reporters were already swarming like buzzards over a fresh carcass. Microphones, camera flashes, murmurs that turned to silence the moment Claire stepped through the metal detector. She wore a navy coat, clean boots, no makeup. Not because she was hiding, but because there was nothing left to prove. No statements to rehearse, no fire to throw. That had all burned already. As she moved through the hall, no one stopped her. No one recognized her. That was exactly how she wanted it. She slid into the last row of the gallery, far from the lawyers, far from the noise, just close enough to see the collapse. Greg Fallon sat at the defendant's table, jaw locked, suit wrinkled. His eyes didn't scan the room. He kept them pinned to the table like if he blinked, the building would cave in. The judge's voice rang steady. The plea deal was read aloud, and the words hit like shovels. 1 count wire fraud. 1 count conspiracy. Permanent prohibition from holding any executive or fiduciary corporate position. Restitution in full to be paid, plus penalties, plus damages. Greg nodded once. No protest, no grandstanding. Just a soft grunt of yes, Your Honor, like the air had finally run out in whatever balloon he'd built his world inside. Claire didn't flinch. Didn't cry. Her fingers stayed laced in her lap, same way they had during every town hall, where Greg bragged about strategic realignment while people around her were walked out with cardboard boxes and broken insurance promises. Now he was the one being walked out. After the gavel dropped, people stirred. Lawyers stood. Reporters ran out to file first drafts. Greg was ushered toward a side door. One final glance offered to the room. He scanned the crowd, but skipped over her like she was wallpaper. Good. He didn't need his recognition. She already had the receipt. Outside, the air bit cold and clean. Someone shoved a mic toward her face as she stepped down the marble steps. Claire Monroe, do you have any comment about today's sentencing? What's next for you? She paused, gave them the same calm look she gave the HR manager who tried to explain away her termination with phrases like budget forecast inconsistencies. Then she shrugged. Probably chop some wood. Watch the snow fall. Breathe. The reporter blinked. That's it? Claire smiled just slightly. That's everything. She walked away before they could ask another question. No applause, no dramatic music, just boots on gravel and a life finally hers again. Back at the cabin that evening, she lit the stove, poured a cup of black coffee, and opened the windows just enough to let the wind in. Let it carry away what was left. Justice wasn't a hammer, it was a whisper, and she'd finally heard it. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.